welcome everybody. My name is Dr. Jerry Reynolds, and I'm an assistant professor of social work at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. And I also run a program in partnership with the Ohio State University called Coach Beyond. It's funded by the Million Coaches Challenge and the Susan Crown Exchange. We're doing basically it's to do education and training for coaches in the state of Indiana. It's a program there's several states that are doing this initiative. And so we're really excited to have, and first of all, in advance, thank you so much to our panelists for being here to really just, share your wisdom with us as we, tackle the challenge of addressing and hopefully eliminating athlete abuse. So I just want to get started real quick if we can. I'm going to have all the panelists briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll do some questions. So I'll just make sure I go to everybody and get us started. So I guess we'll start with Margaret, if you want to take a minute just to introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Margaret Holzer. I am a two-time Olympian, three-time Olympic medalist in swimming. I am a public speaker on sexual abuse. I was a survivor myself and an all-around advocate in a nutshell.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Miss Anita Daniels, welcome.
Good morning. I am Anita Daniels. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, licensed clinical addiction specialist, and I am licensed in North Carolina, Florida, and Indiana, where my friend Jerry is. I am the immediate past president of the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. I own my own private practice, Actualities Limited, which I have owned now for 22 years. And I work with the athlete population, the NFL, the NBPA, the USOPC, and I serve athletes, collegiate athletes here in North Carolina and in Florida. Delighted to be here.
Thank you so much and welcome. Skylar.
Hi, my name is Skylar Kavanaugh. I know I look like Connor LePenick. That's my husband's name. I don't know why he's logged in on Zoom. I'm a graduate of the United States Naval Academy, class of 2019. I was a college athlete. I started out with track and field. I was a pole vaulter, and then I switched to cheerleading at the United States Naval Academy. I am a survivor of sexual assault while a teenager during sports, as well as domestic abuse. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we're glad to have you. Lori.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Okimura. I come from about a 30-year background in the Olympic and Paralympic world, and before that in collegiate sports information. I have considered myself an advocate, but also have become a lot more educated on helping victims of abuse, all different sorts of abuse, and have unfortunately had firsthand experience throughout the 30 years of my career. I'm currently the president of the World Paravolley Federation, which is disability sport for the sport of volleyball.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Lisa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Finnegan. I'm joining the call as a leader at ISEF, an educator, coach, and current player. ISEF, who I work with, stands for Inner City Education Foundation. We're based in Los Angeles, and we serve 2,500 students across 7 school sites. And in the last 5 years, we built a leadership academy that supports students socially, emotionally, mentally, and physically through arts, academics, and athletics. I'm also the director of our international rugby program. So we take students around the world, predominantly Black African American kids around the world. We've been to Fiji, New Zealand, Brazil, England, France, and we've made multiple documentaries that document the lives of students during their formative years. So really excited to be on the call.
Thank you very much, Lisa. We appreciate it. Catherine.
Great to see you all today. My name is Catherine McLean. I'm the Program and Partnerships Director of We Ride Together, a nonprofit dedicated to eliminating abuse in sport. Happy to represent our team here today. I hold an MBA and an MSW and bring my expertise from community mental health and my tenure as a triathlete, rower, volleyball player, and swimmer to this call. And I'm excited to share my personal and professional experiences on this call today.
Great. Thank you very much. And Garrett, you want to introduce yourself just as somebody who's going to be monitoring the chat and kind of help us organize the call today.
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Garrett LaMartina. I'm an MSW MED Sport Management dual degree student at Millersville University, and I'm also a student member and intern of the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports.
Thanks so much, Garrett. And just to kind of give everybody just a general format of how things are going to go today, we're going to thanks everybody for giving us a brief bio. We're going to spend about 5 minutes per question. We have some structured questions that we're going to have. And then what we will do is allow the panelists to respond to each of those questions. And then at the end, we'll have about 10 minutes for question and answer opening to the panel. And please feel free to drop a question in the chat if you'd like to do so as well. Just to kind of give you some rough some statistics related to abuse in sports. Suicide is the second most common cause of death in NCAA athletes. 65% of athletes indicate experiencing at least one incident of psychological harm or neglect while participating in sports. 37% of athletes report having experienced one form of physical abuse at least once as a child in sport. And 14 to 29% of athletes have been a victim of at least one form of sexual violence before the age of 18. And regarding coaches, 19% of coaches feel confident in identifying off-the-field stressors for athletes. 18% feel confident in referring athletes to support. About 18% report feeling highly confident in their ability to link athletes to mental health resources. And 69%, almost 7 in 10 of coaches report feeling moderately, very, or extremely stressed. And so I think that this is a really good opportunity for us to not only learn about the prevalence of athlete abuse in sports, but also to really empower coaches through knowledge. As you can see, there's clearly a gap in knowledge. It's not that they don't want to do something. It's about, a lot of times it's about not knowing what to do. So definitely, as our discussion goes today, I think we want to make sure that we focus on empowering coaches. And this panel here is so great. And, I'm really excited about learning from them about how we can do this. So the first question I want to open up to the panel is to describe how you first became aware of the rampant issue of abuse in sports and how your perspective has changed. Does anybody want to open up the floor from our panel?
Sure, Jerry, I'll open up the floor because I think maybe of the group here, I'm probably the most removed from coaching. So my coaching experience came early in my career, primarily with young people, right? Club sports, and my sport was volleyball. And at the time, this was in the late 80s, early 90s, there were not very many, I think maybe proactive, education courses, or even, not just for coaches, but for the people that they were coaching, right? The youngsters and the parents. So early on, for me, the recognition was that people had a hard time understanding which behaviors were, we've all heard it, right? Which was just sort of aggressive coaching or enthusiastic coaching versus flat out abuse, right? And this, this is where my kind of like, my experience started is, it's okay to have, coaches that are very enthusiastic and really get into, connecting with their students or with their athletes. But where do you draw the line when enthusiasm crosses over into abuse? And that's really, for me, where things started to change. Unfortunately, I did have an experience with a number of young women who, not really came forward, but were asking questions of themselves, like, am I really not a good athlete? Am I not a good volleyball player? Am I not? It was always the burden was always put on them. Is it me? Is it my fault? And unfortunately, it's not always, I mean, it's really unfortunate that they always think it's their fault. But same thing with the
Hmm.
coaches. Are my students not, am I not teaching in a way that my athletes are understanding? Because I look at that court over there where this coach is yelling and screaming and acting in a different way. Is it me? So there was a lot of that. Is it me? On both sides, right? The coaches and the athletes. And as you move forward and realize that, sometimes the conversation unfortunately stops right there, right? Nobody ever gets an answer to the is it me, is it you question. That
Hmm.
changed a little bit for me. And then just to skip forward, when I was involved with the National Federation of Sport, there was unfortunately, a very long, drawn out, protracted case of sexual misconduct that spanned about 28, almost 29 years. Right. And what we learned, I spent some time working with the group Safe Sport International overseas, and some of the statistics, in the research are horrifying. I mean, you made some points early on in the introduction of our discussion, but a lot of people that were in their 50s were finally coming forward and saying, when I was 16, my coach abused me, or I suffered this when I was 15 or 16 years old, and they now are parents of the same age group, and finally coming forward and realizing. So that for me changed everything. It's that we need to have better mechanisms to protect athletes and coaches, right? Because it's not just one way; it's both ways, right? And we
Hmm.
have to be better at providing allyship and resources. When somebody is ready to say something, we need to be prepared to listen, right? So that's sort of where my lens comes from.
Yes, and I also just want to acknowledge like the courage that some of our panelists have had in sharing their own experiences about being survivors. So I just want to first of all acknowledge that and thank you so much for being courageous and continuing to speak about this issue because that requires a lot of courage in itself. And you know, it's not just some people have learned from unfortunately firsthand experience. And so just I guess kind of building on this, just we'll take one more panelist. Just like how has this changed either from become like as Lori said, sort of working in the industry, but also like as a result of your experience where or that first client you had, did it snowball? Like did you become aware that this was such a prominent issue?
I'll respond to that. I have to say, I was a cheerleader in high school. I do not remember the coaches in high school being the way that I've seen coaches at the collegiate level. Um, at the collegiate level, when I started working with athletes here in Durham, North Carolina, I noticed that the coaches were using a lot of profanity and yelling at the athletes and I finally started saying, can you communicate without calling them names, without yelling? Yes, you got to yell, but can you do that without the profanity? And so what happened when I started attending the practices is the coaches would look and see me and say, "Oh yeah, Miss D, I know. I got to do better. I got to do better." So just my presence there helped them understand the athletes can hear you without being called derogatory names or yanked out of a game because they made one mistake. So that was where I started intervening, and a lot of the athletes that I work with at the collegiate level have come to me seeking my support. And surprisingly, even some of the coaches have come to me to say, okay, I think I messed up. How can I correct this? And so at least their recognition of I probably could have handled the situation better and how can I do better moving forward has been refreshing for me as a therapist working with athletes who feel they are being verbally abused.
Yeah, thank you for that, Anita. And you're right. It's like your perspective came from the coaches, like saying, "Oh, wow, I didn't experience this, but when I started working with coaches, it kind of unleashed itself." Just anybody else want to share an insight before we move to the next question? Margaret, thank you.
Yeah, just to kind of touch on things that both of those ladies said. I know for me, I've been specifically working with sports for 14, 15 years now. And right when a lot of these programs were first getting started, there was an influx of people and this perception that, oh my gosh, there's way more abuse than potentially that there is because they're getting 40, 50, 60 years worth of people coming forward. And I think just to reiterate that people don't come forward when they don't have a place to go. And if you think no one's going to hear you, if no one's going to listen, why are you going to bother to tell your story? And so I think that having these places to go, having someone that they think will listen to them. I know I've personally, as an athlete, been in positions where I'm like, well, do I recognize that this is wrong? Yes. Is anything going to be done about it? Is anyone going to hear me? Is there anywhere else I can go that would be different? And the answer was no. And so I just stayed where I was and kept doing what I was because I didn't believe that I had a different alternative. And so I think as times change, as people have a stronger voice, but mostly just recognizing that there are options and you have options, that's going to continue to make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's with information and, and like you said, places to go, people can, share what they need to share and, hopefully get the care and support that they need and address those issues appropriately. Kind of transitioning to the next question, and I'm going to post in the chat just so everybody has it, just in case I miss it. What are some of the warning signs unique to athletes that may be experiencing abuse, whether they're physical, emotional, or sexual?
Jerry, I can jump in to this question, and I'd like to make it specific to the demographic that we serve in South Los Angeles. So demographically, we serve the highest need in the country. Most of our students live below the poverty line, shared accommodation. So we have students that come in at all grade levels that are experiencing adversity, challenges, and in a lot of cases, abuse. So I think from an educational perspective, we have really strict policies and kind of procedures as to what we do. And there's a clear framework of what teachers, coaches, administrators should be doing. So from recognizing like early signs, like physically, some of the signs, some of the common signs are, sudden drops in performance and, unexplained injuries. If you see bruises and marks on students that wouldn't be typical, emotional. So just emotional withdrawal is another one, and reluctance to get involved if they're normally pretty interactive, and then mental social is having issues with boundaries with adults. So I think just from our perspective is we do deal with a lot of students that experience high levels of ACEs and trauma, and I think one of the things that I've actually been working on over the last decade is with principals and administrators to make sure that we have mandated training at the beginning of every single year. We have mandated training for every member of staff that comes into our organization across all of our 7 school sites and our leadership academy. So that informs from the get-go, you have to complete your mandated training before the academic year starts. That's certainly, and it's a really thorough training as well. So and I take the same training every single year, and it's a kind of reminder that this is an incredibly important part of holistically how we develop and support students through their school journey.
Yeah, and you're right. It sounds like it's not just knowing the signs, but it's really having that consistent framework built in and says, yes, we are making this a priority, and absolutely you're going through this training every year. And that's critical, especially in any setting, but even more critical in the setting that you're in as well. So thank you for sharing that.
I can jump in here too, and I can kind of offer a different angle from our Athlete Survivor Story program and the athlete focus groups that we do with athletes from team sports, individual sports, water sports, snow sport, horse sport, you name it. We have grassroots level athletes all the way to ex-Olympians, and as well as our more quantitative research with current events and statistics and that kind of thing. I think signs that we see are that the types of abuse that athletes experience often overlap and intersect, and that there's most oftentimes more going on behind the scenes than what meets the eye. And so when there's grooming going on, there's psychological and emotional abuse as well, or hazing having a sexual component, things like that. And so those nuances to look out for, that it's not black and white, if you will. And I think the sign that we see in hindsight most of all is, man, something just really felt off, and I couldn't put my finger on it. But just that intuitive tone, and that I've heard from parents, from teammates, from athletes themselves, even having that that confusion of, it didn't feel normal, but I didn't realize it was so bad until afterwards, or it's just how it was, or kind of to what Margaret was saying, is that I didn't think anyone was going to listen or care, that I thought I had to tolerate this, or I didn't think anyone would believe me, or I wanted to make the team. I didn't want to lose my seat in the boat, so I just continued to go with it, and that kind of thing. On the more topical side of to what Lisa was sharing, you know, those other physical and emotional signs, it's I've heard and seen the not wanting to go to practice, but also the opposite, where there's this heightened performance and increase in performance and striving as well. And so it can be this and the but alsos, and it's just really hard to kind of make sense of and navigate. And there's changes in mood, the anxiety, the anger, a lot of maladaptive coping strategies with eating disorders, substance abuse, changes in personal relationships, to what's been mentioned before, with boundary issues, sleep issues, health issues, symptoms of burnout, negative self-talk, decrease in patience, disengagement from friends, family, school, all these kinds of things going on. And so, in thinking about coaches as our audience here, those warning signs to look out for, I think that there's a big list of things to have your eye out for, that might be symptoms of something else as well, but might clue you into something going on. And so I would say particularly to look out for those signs of grooming would be really important, about, you know, an athlete being targeted, getting that special attention, that undue trust, the extended influence, gift giving, isolation, sexualizing the relationship, dependency, secrecy, threats, manipulation. All of these things are little patterns and signs that, if we can catch them early on, that's really great, and can inform our preventative practices and our structures and our policies to keep athletes safe, because it's all interconnected.
Yeah, and I think, like, I really want to just highlight one of the words that you shared, and it's definitely that word of nuance. And I think that, kind of transitioning with the questions, one thing we always, may want to know a little bit more about, especially from you all, are, just in your experiences, are certain settings more prone to athlete abuse? So if y'all could just elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, Jerry, I'll take this. So I do believe that, yes, the environment that you find yourself in, right, whether you're being abused or the abuser, does definitely have an impact. So if you take, for example, I just had this really interesting experience with college age athletes, and their assumption was that because they were competing at a university, that maybe there was a level of protection there for them that unfortunately did not exist. And Catherine, she pointed out all the signs, and every single one of them was there, right? There was declining hygiene, there were withdrawn, emotional symptoms, and these athletes who were being abused verbally, physically, emotionally, every which way. I think their setting or the surroundings that they had, which led them to sort of be misinformed that somebody would listen, right, or somebody would care. I think that was, like, in a form of itself, another form of abuse, because when they did come forward, they weren't believed, right? And they weren't, and it wasn't just that they weren't believed, it was almost a concerted effort to prove them to be people not of good moral character, or not, not truthful, or, I mean, it was really unbelievable. The gaslighting was completely unbelievable. Now, contrast that to other situations where, an athlete will come forward. And there was a situation I was involved in where the athlete came forward to the athletic trainer, and the trainer thankfully had, enough preparation, like to Lisa's point, right, had gone through mandated training and knew to recognize the signs where, the enablers of the other situation actually became the protectors and the resources, for this contrasting situation there. So the environment that the athlete and the coaches find themselves in, I think, really, really makes a huge difference. And the word I introduced was enablers, right? I mean, are there going to be people that are going to try and convince a victim ready to come forward, or even convince them that it's not happening to them, or that what they're feeling is not validated or real? And what's worse is, will an enabler actually try to interfere in that athlete coming forward? And it's happening likewise. I mean, it's happening through all levels of engagement, right? From high school age to even younger than that, and all the way up through the ranks, even to the high performance level. So I'm used to dealing with a lot of Olympic and Paralympic athletes, and it's still happening, right, at every level, no matter where you are.
Yeah, and I think I just was going to just build on that, and Margaret, I'll let you share a little bit more, but just like what you said, it's like sometimes there's these assumptions that there are these built-in protections, and we have to be mindful of that as well. So, Margaret.
Yeah, and I was going to say just circumstances, right? Certain trips, certain experiences, you're going to have team travel trips, which in theory you might think of just team sports, but there's a lot of individual sports where you still have situations like that. There might be situations where, depending on financial aid, you're traveling in a team travel situation and you don't have the same adult supervision that you might have otherwise. Another example is, what the athlete themselves is conditioned to. Each sport's going to be a little bit unique there, but we get conditioned to some pretty odd things that the average person would look at and go, wait, what? But in your community, in your sport, that's nothing abnormal. And the example I always use is massage, right? I used to get massages on a pool deck in front of thousands of people, where you would lie on the deck, you would take your shirt off, face down, of course, but this is happening in front of a stadium full of thousands and thousands of people, and you don't think twice about it. And so there's these examples where you get desensitized to traditional normal activity, if you will. And again, that's going to be sport specific, because, I don't know, obviously, every sport. But sometimes you don't even see the warning signs because you're in the moment, you're conditioned to think a certain way. And then you have this person obviously taking advantage of that because they're trying to circumvent the rules and whatnot. So I think there are special, I guess, things that each community has to deal with. It's going to make them maybe a little bit more adverse, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, Skylar.
Hi. So apologies for the background noise. I have a toddler. But I think what Margaret just brought up is really significant to my experience is Jamie Dancher, who was part of the 2000 Olympic team, and she was if you watched Athlete A on Netflix, she was like one of the first survivors to come up about Dr. Nasser. And I attended Amanda Borden's gymnastics. She was the 96 Magnificent Seven Olympic team. She was team captain. She was a pivotal part in my life. She would have meetings with our parents, and she would say, gymnastics world is like very abusive. It always has been. The Carollis, like if you follow gymnastics at all, and she talked to our parents and say, there's no room for verbal abuse, sexual abuse, whatever. And I remember I knew about Dr. Nasser because Jamie Dancher was my coach, and she told us, like, I was sexually abused. And this was far before any of the Dr. Nasser things came out. And about the massage thing, he wasn't a physical therapist, but that was my sexual abuse when I was a teenager. I went to a massage therapist. He was like supposed to be special. He was supposed to be the best. And I didn't realize until all of the Dr. Nasser things came out and all of the information came out, I didn't even realize that was abuse. And my now husband, we were just dating at the time, and COVID had just happened. We were going on a walk, and I remember saying, I think I was sexually abused. And it's so significant because it was all in the name of sports. It was all in the name of, this is going to make you better. This is going to help you. This is going to whatever. And it still gives me nightmares. And it set me up when I was a midshipman at the Naval Academy. it wasn't a fellow cheerleader. I mean, I did collegiate cheerleading. I was in an abusive relationship, and it was like all of this set me up to be, I don't want to say a victim, but it really impacted me as a person, and it's something that I still carry with me, and it's still something that affects me to this day. I still have nightmares about it. I still think about it. And when I think about the symptoms of it, I completely withdrew. I mean, even in high school, when this was going on, I withdrew because I knew it was wrong. I knew something wasn't right. And then in college, in an abusive relationship, something wasn't right. And I think a lot we had the Love Foundation. It was Yeardley Love, who was murdered by her boyfriend. She was a lacrosse player. Amazing, amazing work that her parents are now doing. And they came to the Naval Academy and we had a discussion about it. We had a whole training on it. And I was dating this guy at the time, and I remember even my classmates, my company mates looked at me, and they knew something was off. They knew something was wrong. And it's heartbreaking because something was wrong. My company officer, my senior enlisted leader pulled me in and say, "Hey, what's going on? What's going on?" And I think when that abuse, I feel like it avalanched for me. And it really affected me. So that's my 2 cents. I don't know how to end it. Thank you.
First of all, I really appreciate you having the courage to share your story. And I also will say that I also commend those who were able to recognize like that, something was going on. And I think that that's really important. And it's like, just from what you indicated, you knew that there were things going on. You were in this setting, but it almost seems like you didn't realize that what you were experiencing. And then the second thing is that it manifested itself in a way that, quite honestly, as a teenager and in the military, you probably didn't think it would manifest itself in the way that it did. So thank you so much for sharing that, because it's really important insight is in terms of like I didn't think I was prone in this setting, but in reality, it was. And so, but on the other hand, I'm glad that you were able to see the support network that you had. So thank you all for sharing that. And that's just really important to know. And kind of just speaking of people on the front lines, I just want to move to the next question. In your view, like what should the role of a coach be in addressing athlete abuse? And also, what are some of the challenges and barriers that you believe coaches are facing in addressing these issues?
I'll start with that one, just thinking about the collegiate arena, which is very different, I think, from the professional arena. At least it appears to be with the athletes that I serve. A lot of the coaches played sports. They were yelled at, they were cursed at, they just thought it was normal. So they do what was done to them. And I remember my days at ECU. I was a resident advisor in the dorm with the athletes, which was kind of unusual, but I had football, track, and that was men's and women's track. But I would go to the practices, and the things that I heard these athletes being called, even the women's basketball players, by the coaches, I just thought I could not believe my ears. But most of the athletes say, well, I've been playing this sport since, like the football players, since I was 4 or 5 years old. And that's just what coaches do. So, what has happened is a lot of the behavior, particularly the verbal abuse, has been normalized. Like, that's just what you do. Well, it's one thing to yell because it's loud. It's another thing to yell because you're frustrated. And it's another thing to call your players derogatory names because you're frustrated and because they're not doing things exactly the way you would like. But my concern becomes when they see that to be normal. Like, this is just how it is because this is how it's always been. So I have been talking to coaches and encouraging them. You can still yell because they need to hear you, but the level of profanity and the name calling, I do not see the value in that. And if anything, it diminishes who they are as individuals and their belief in their ability as an athlete playing their sport. So I think I've had some success with that, but there's still much work to be done, definitely in the collegiate area.
Yeah, thank you for that, Anita. And I definitely think it's like you were just in that environment. You're like, oh wow, like there's just things that I never thought were being shared. And by the way, Skylar, I love our new guest. By the way, I just have to acknowledge that because if I had little ones, they'd be doing the same thing. If my little ones were with me, they'd be doing the same exact thing. So, anyways, um,
Can I
yeah,
jump in here real quick?
go ahead.
Oh, I just definitely hi to the little kiddo. Brought a smile on all our faces. I really appreciate your answer, Anita, and talking about some of the challenges and barriers facing the issue about these, cultural old patterns that have just been kind of ingrained in sport, but are not healthy and not productive, if you will, and offering those alternatives. And I think, the coach has a key role in setting the tone with those behavioral expectations and the expectations in their team and their environment, and have that position to do so from the top down, and setting the new standards. And I think boundaries are one of the utmost important things that coaches can lean into and learn, and having healthy boundaries with our athletes. We know that they have huge influence on athletes, sleep and health and nutrition and all these other things, but having some guidelines on how to maintain even appropriate physical boundaries, and being aware of cultural differences and those kinds of things, and empowering their athletes to give consent and maintain respect and confidentiality and all these good things for trust and care and support. And I think, some of the other barriers, I just got out a call last week with over 70 different coaches, and there's frustration from these coaches that education materials and resources and training are not readily available and accessible. That coaches are wanting to make these changes, but another challenge that they're facing is that they don't have a lot of time. And so these really long trainings that aren't accessible to them, or aren't comprehensive or tangible or bite-sized, are not setting them up for success. And so they're really needing straightforward information and quick alternatives and quick actionable solutions on how to do things in a more positive and productive manner that are still increasing performance and building the athlete holistically, not just the skills of their unique sport and that kind of thing. So thank you for the time to add that.
Absolutely. And I think, kind of building on that, one of those nuanced questions that you might run into, this is a good transition actually. How do you think coaches can identify the line between being strict versus abusive? And also how can they foster a healthy environment?
Jerry, I just want to jump in real quick. I think from the last question to this question, and Catherine's comments hit home so much. I mean, this is, there for all the coaches, whether you're a seasoned coach, a veteran coach, or you're just coming into it, please take out of your, playbook the notion that the more abusive you are, the more success you'll achieve on the field of play. Because I think there's a whole generation, that was raised on, okay, well, don't say anything. If you have that instinct, like, you think something's wrong, but then you don't want to say anything because, well, but we're winning, but I had this whole 30-year, experience with one particular coach, and why nobody ever wanted to say anything about it was, well, but he, his tactics may be a little rude, but he's achieving such success with his teams. And look at all of the athletes who have gone on for college and Olympics and everything. And that is the worst, the worst place you can put yourself. His coaches have enough to deal with, right? But at the same time, don't adopt, the notion that, and please, try to ignore the fact that in the old school method of coaching, that maybe the louder the coach or the more abusive the coach, the better the win percentage was. That really isn't a correlation, right? That's false data. And it's a dangerous cycle that keeps repeating itself, because as new coaches are introduced, into the field of play, and they might see an older coach that, well, gosh, that guy is, Hall of Fame, won this, won that, or that woman, she's got all these Olympic swimmers under her belt. But if you look at the tactics, at what cost to the athlete, does that come, right? And it's never a win for the athlete in the future. So I think in answering this question, how can coaches draw that line, identify that line, it really comes back to what Catherine said. There needs to be more available resources, right? There needs to be more education or more information that's available that can be consumed in a way that is time sensitive, that is, that does consider that a lot of people are put into coaching roles, especially with the younger age groups, where it's like, oh, okay, we need somebody to coach the high school lacrosse team. Who's available sixth period, or who, sometimes it's sort of like you just get this role thrown upon you, right? And if you're the type of person that's curious and you want to be a better coach and you're actually interested in coaching, then you will seek out that information. If you're not, then you may not seek out that information, and we may find ourselves in a situation that some of our survivors have, been unfortunately put through, and also some of our experts on the panel have seen from both behind the scenes and, right in front. So just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Laura, for mentioning that, because it's just really it's sort of like this. We need this openness to learning and to knowledge and things that are going to surprise you or challenge you, quite frankly, even if you've been in a role for as long as you have, and to not be and I think we've seen, I don't know, I mean, I can't think of a tangible example right now, but I'm sure I'm hopeful that there's coaches who maybe used to draw that hard line, and now they're just like, well, I've backed off a little bit because I know athletes are different now, and just the timing is different. So I think that that's something that we have to keep in mind, especially as we move forward.
Hey, Jerry.
I would like to.
Oh, sorry, Anita.
That's okay. I would like to respond to that because I remember one of the former female pros that came to Duke and spoke to the women's basketball team before a game. And she talked specifically about realizing that she was diagnosed with a mental illness and did not really understand what was going on, and went to her coach, and her coach said, I don't know how to help you, but I'm going to try to figure this out. I'm going to help you try to figure this out, even though I have no idea what direction to point you in. And I think that we do have to provide more resources for the coaches. And I think we have to provide them time to have access to the resources and get a chance to demonstrate what they've learned. It just feels like they go from out of one season into the next. And when do they have an opportunity to really get the exposure and the training that they need? But this coach said, I don't know what to do, but I'm going to help you figure it out. And I think it meant a lot to those women to hear the athletes say, my coach did try to help me, even though the coach said, I don't know anything about this, but I can't just leave you out here. Let's see how we can work together.
Absolutely. And Kathy, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in there when you were talking about coaches who may look back on, what may have happened before and recognized it and changed their approach. That just immediately made me think of Cassie Rice, who is the owner of Gym Cats, a gym in Las Vegas that trained Tasha Schweikert, and Tasha Schweikert was a Larry Nassar survivor. And I know after all of the abuse with Larry Nassar came out, she went back to a whole bunch of her gymnasts, elite gymnasts, level 10 gymnasts, and asked them about their experience, called them and interviewed them, and wanted to know what she was like, what her approach was, if they felt safe, if they had any experiences like that, if they were willing to share, if there was any abuse. She really went back and just, from what I've heard and from multiple different people, just really changed that approach after that came out. So I think that was a really good example of her being very self-aware, seeing what was going on in the climate and wanting to make a change herself.
Yeah, and also being courageous to take that feedback and be extremely vulnerable, to say, okay, what was done, what can we do? And, I honestly, they're probably like, I probably wasn't the best in my approach, but, now I'm recognize this and I'm trying to learn from that. So, it's just that level of, insight and, hopefully, and also vulnerability that is just saying, hey, maybe I need to change my approach. And, we have about 10 minutes left. So I wanted to, if we have members of the audience, either you can drop a question in the chat or make your, show yourself on camera. Just do you have questions for our participants, our panelists?
Yeah, I have a question and kind of a story too. My name's Hallie. I am a student at Ball State. I really appreciated the idea of something felt off because something felt off. And I'm kind of glad that I learned that from this. I remember when I was like 10 years old, I was a gymnast and my coach at the time told me like don't go to any other camps because they're going to ruin you. They're going to ruin everything that I taught you. Any college camps, don't go to any of them. But I really wanted to, subtle foreshadowing, go to Ball State camp, like a Ball State gymnastics camp. And so I went because I wanted to go. And then I came back and he realized that I had went. He didn't talk to me for 2 weeks after that. I was 10 years old. He didn't talk to me for 2 weeks. He didn't spot me. He didn't do anything. And I was confused. And I went to my mom and I was like, Mom, I don't want to go to gymnastics today. And she was very confused. She was like, why? Like, you love gymnastics. One of the first things that I ever said the first day I went to gymnastics was, Mommy, I'm meant to be a gymnast. So she was very confused on why. Like, and it was just really, I liked learning that something just felt off because something just felt off. And then also he didn't let us wear shorts in the gym. And then the next gym that I went to, they allowed us to wear shorts in the gym. And that kind of confused me as well. Something just felt off. I also was a coach for a little bit for recreational gymnastics, and I love doing that. I still think I want to continue doing that in my future life. I guess my question now is when I was coaching, a lot of times kids would come in and they would like talk about things with me and stuff like that. I guess my question is like, when children are being abused outside of the sport, what should I like look out for? What can I do to like help those athletes?
I think the fact right off the bat that you're open to that is amazing. I think coaches have no idea the important role that sometimes they play, right? Sometimes we get focused on the negative of them being the abuser, but in reality, a lot of time the coach is that first person that someone is going to feel comfortable with. And that's maybe the person they're going to tell, or that's the person who's going to notice something is off because they're spending 5 or 6 days a week with this kid, right? So I think that goes back to that education, knowing what your resources are. When you first start coaching, if you don't have any resources, even just a simple Google search of what is out there is sometimes just a really easy way to kind of arm yourself, I guess. But mostly just knowing that you, like I said, you are that first line of defense, and that's a huge place of honor, to be honest. So not to be afraid of that, because I know sometimes that can be a little bit intimidating. But just knowing that there's a lot of information. The internet has been amazing from that standpoint, that information is so much easier to get nowadays than it used to be. And like I said, just a really, really simple Google search will help you find out the local resources.
My goodness, what is it not working?
I think, Hallie, there's also the option of when coaches, when you start whatever your coaching assignment is, whatever organization or group, to find out, okay, in case of an emergency, who do I contact? So a lot of people who are in private club coaching, they'll be told, well, you are a mandatory reporter. Oh, what's that? They don't know. So I think, a lot of cases, like I've got some friends that are coaching in the private club space, and they do have maybe 2 or 3 points of contact that they're given, before the season starts. Like if something were to happen, whether it's like a medical situation or abuse, potential abuse or such. The other thing, and it's sort of how we all came together on this call, is there are resources like the Courage First Athlete Helpline as well, right? Which is not just for somebody who's seeking immediate support, but it's for people who are seeking information, like where can I go to do this? Or I might have an athlete who, is in this situation. I can tell you from firsthand experience that there are two situations that I can think of both coaches and athletes at the collegiate level that reached out to the athlete helpline and were able to then sort of direct their focus in the right location, for them. And because they had administrators and people above them, supervisors that were not listening, to their caution.
Yeah, and just so Kathy just posted in the chat just some information about the Courage First Athlete Helpline, and just I also know several panelists were involved in the actual development of this project as well. So this is really an extension and recognition of the prevalence of abuse in athletics. And I really commend the Courage First, all the folks from Courage First who really help, and those who advise the group on creating this, because this is a tremendous resource for available. Every time I know when I mention it casually to people, they're like, "Oh wow, that's great to know." But it's also about like, okay, what can we do to kind of continue to spread the word? Well, let's take another question if anybody has it. Thank you, Hallie, for sharing that information. Anybody else have a question they want to address for our panelists?
Hey, Jerry, while they're thinking about potential questions, I'd be curious from the coaches that are on the call, what level of athletics are you currently, coaching at? Is it youngsters? Is it adults? Is it primarily girls or boys? That would be interesting. It's always interesting to know, because just being on this call is your first step in getting more information, right? Which is really, really great. And we're so thankful for the people that have joined us.
I think I got on late.
Maybe people can type it in the chat, what their level of coaching is, if it's the younger children or if it's at the collegiate or professional level.
Yeah, we have several. I have a couple of my students I know in my class that are on the call too. So there's definitely varied groups of folks on the call. So some, I think there's some coaches probably out there. There's some professionals in our social work or other professions as well. Students, so I think we have a kind of a varied audience. So if anybody wants to, I know personally I've coached at pretty much college all the way down to as young as 4. So this is just something I've personally done. With 3 boys, you get thrown into the ring as a coach at some point. But also I've volunteered at the collegiate level as well. So I'm with cross country and track. So
yeah, and I coached, hold on, let me get my video back on here. I coached gymnastics throughout college and for a few years after, compulsory level competitive gymnastics. So, and recreational. So really it went from like a 5-year-old age range to maybe 13 or 14. And I actually coached Skylar here. So when she was a wee bitty one. So I'm really happy to have her here.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. And Kathy, we have a couple more minutes, but I didn't know if you want to take it just kind of to wrap up the call. Just to talk a little bit about the Courage First Athlete Helpline and how it is a resource, and just anything that else you want to share about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Courage First Athlete Helpline was developed through the National Child Abuse Helpline, which is the 40-year-old national line that's been around, obviously since the 80s, and the Foundation for Global Sports Development, who is their great nonprofit initiative. They made the HBO documentary At the Heart of Gold about Larry Nassar, and they fund a lot of different sports initiatives. So around the end of 2021, they came to Child Help and asked us to create an athlete helpline for all ages, all levels, that addresses any kind of abuse and mental well-being, really just the physical and mental safety of athletes. So we launched at the end of 2022, and we've just been attempting to spread awareness to everyone in athlete communities ever since. So it's for athletes, former athletes, coaches, parents, anyone in sports communities that has questions, needs immediate crisis intervention, looking for resources, whether they're local in their state or national. We have a big database that our counselors can go to and find different programs and educational resources to refer help seekers to. It's call, text, or chat. It does run from Monday through Friday from 12 to 8 p.m. Eastern. So any contacts outside of that roll over to the National Child Abuse Hotline, and those counselors can see that it's coming in from the athlete helpline, and they can either help immediately if there's a crisis situation, if it's suicidal ideation, if it's something that needs immediate attention, or they can let them know if you'd like to speak to a sports counselor later to contact during those other hours. So we're really just trying to spread awareness about it. Anyone can use it. We're used by a lot of national governing boards as a resource, different USA sports governing boards. The U.S. Center for Safe Sport has us as a resource to provide to those who reach out to them and disclose abuse if they're looking for resources themselves. So not a reporting line, but an emotional and physical and mental safety support line.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And last but not least, I want to thank all of our panelists for their insight and your time and your wisdom and being with us today. This is definitely there is, yes, Monique, there is a flyer, and we can certainly I will Kathy, I don't know if you want to put your email in the chat just so people can have it. Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
And that way she can get that information to you. But also, I just want to say on behalf of Coach Beyond Indiana, thank you all so much for being part of this today. And we also will have a series coming up on December the 8th. Yes. And we're going to talk more specifics about reporting. So that will be the next session. And then we'll also have a session in January, kind of focusing on the mental health aspects of this. And we're partnering with Courage First to present this. So thank you all for your time today and for being here. We really, really appreciate you. And let's fight the good fight, and continue to do what we need to do to address and prevent athlete abuse.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.